Hello and welcome back to TVP World's News Service. I'm Anna Kalczyńska. Vladimir Putin questioned the US brokered proposal for a ceasefire, setting forth a set of conditions and terms. While agreeing with the proposal to cease hostilities, Putin reiterates claims that the current Ukrainian government is part of the underlying problem. One key person was, however, absent from the US-Russia negotiations. Keith Kellogg, Donald Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, was excluded from the talks as the Kremlin deems him too supportive of Ukraine. Speaking during a joint press conference with Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko, Putin demanded several concessions from Ukraine, including that Kiev stop mobilization and training of troops and other nations stop supplying weapons to the war-torn country. At the same time, Putin called the US idea, quote, great and correct, adding that it still needed to be discussed. Additionally, during the conference, Vladimir Putin floated an idea of talking the deal over on the phone. US President Donald Trump says Russia's openness to the proposed ceasefire in Ukraine is promising, but not yet final. Speaking about the negotiations, Trump said that while things in Russia are going okay, the real significance will come when a final outcome is reached. He added that much work remains over the next 30 days, including territorial negotiations.
We're getting words that things are going okay in Russia, and it doesn't mean anything until we hear what the final outcome is. But they have very serious discussions going on right now with President Putin and others, and hopefully they all want to end this nightmare. It's a nightmare. It's a horrible thing. Well, we'd like to see a ceasefire from Russia. And we have, not been working in the dark. We've been discussing with Ukraine land and pieces of land that would be kept and lost and all of the other elements of a final agreement. There's a power plant involved, a very big power plant involved. Who's going to get the power plant and who's going to get this and that? And so, it's not an easy process. But phase one is the ceasefire. A lot of the individual subjects have been discussed, though. We've been discussing concepts of land because you don't want to waste time with a ceasefire if it's not going to mean anything. So we're saying, look, this is what you can get. This is what you can't get. They discussed NATO and being in NATO, and everybody knows what the answer to that is. They've known that answer for 40 years.
Andreas Umland, analyst from the Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies, joins us now to discuss the latest. Good morning, sir. Thank you for your time. So Michael Waltz confirmed the shape of the negotiated deal, a US-Ukraine minerals deal, potential for European troops on the ground to secure peace, Kyiv giving up its ambitions to join NATO, and Ukraine ceding some parts of its land in the Donbas regions, as well as territories heavily populated by the people of Russia. So how likely you think these terms could go well with the Russian side? And do you think this could be the final settlement?
I don't think that this will be enough for Russia, because they have had at the beginning of the war much larger plans about actually NATO withdrawing to the situation from 1997. If you remember the December 2021 declarations that were, or letters that were sent to Western leaders. So this is already a very far-reaching, what Waltz said, a very far-reaching concession from Ukraine, and the US is actually, by way of supporting that in its mediating role, now violating a number of agreements that it has with Ukraine, starting from the Budapest Memorandum, the strategic charter from 2008, by the way, signed then by a Republican president, George Bush Jr., or the bilateral security agreement between Ukraine and the US signed in 2024. And now the US is suddenly sort of mediating a deal where Ukraine would cede territory. So that is a worrisome development by itself. But I don't even think that this sort of trampling of international law will be sufficient for Putin. He wants more, and he wants eventually some sort of control over Ukraine. He calls that denazification, which means de facto a de-Ukrainization, a de-sovereignization of Ukraine, and transforming Ukraine again into a Russian protectorate.
So these are this is your understanding of Vladimir Putin's intentions, but on the other side we have the peace through strength US policy. So what could be the American answer then?
I mean, oddly, so far the impression is that peace through strength means that strength is applied to Ukraine and not to Russia. The obviously misunderstanding during the election campaign was that the US would exert pressure on Russia to change its position, but I don't see any pressure so far, apart from a sort of elusive announcement of possible sanctions by the US, which by Donald Trump, which disregards the fact that the US has already imposed most of the sanctions that it can impose on Russia. And if it wants to really hurt Russia, then the US would actually have to impose heavy sanctions on third parties, on countries like China, India, other countries that are currently trading with Russia and that have replaced the West as a trading partner. But is the US really ready to then go into a global trade war for Ukraine? I have my doubts. So this is an empty threat by Trump, and all the pressure so far, all the strength so far has gone in the direction of Ukraine. So that is I mean, I don't even know what to say on that. This is pathetic.
So changing the subject, Greenland seems to have been an important matter of discussion at the meeting in the White House. US President Donald Trump told NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte that US control of Greenland was necessary for international security. We'll be talking to you, said Trump to Rutte. Asked by a reporter about plans for a possible annexation, Trump said, well, I think it will happen. So can you imagine NATO being instrumental in securing the US annexation of Greenland?
I think NATO could actually be the structure through which hopefully this can somehow be resolved, because both Denmark and the US are NATO members. So, that would be very odd now if the two NATO countries that have a security agreement anyway, and that are also linked via many other connections that have an intense trade relationship, that they would be now quarreling about these lands. American companies can do basically whatever they want in Denmark already. There's no need to annex Denmark for the US to get American companies into exploiting Denmark's riches. So this is all a very strange story. I hope that people in the U.S. Congress and in U.S. civil society and will simply tell the administration that this is not the way the world functions. It's a very odd development. Also, to me, frankly, in this form, unpredictable in the during the election campaign. The same story goes of course for Canada. Who would have thought during the election campaign that the US would get into conflicts with countries like Denmark and Canada?
And all this in a larger program and in a larger idea of breaking the close ties between China and Russia. And China is hosting a meeting with Russian and Iranian representatives on Friday to discuss the Iranian nuclear program. That's according to Chinese Foreign Ministry. So how is this Donald Trump's idea going, according to you?
I also think it's not going well because these relations now, I would also say, unfortunately, between Russia and China are very deep. They are bilateral. China is profiting from this relationship. Russia is profiting from this relationship. And Russia is now even, I would say, dependent in a number of ways from China. So how the US can break up this alliance is difficult for me to see. I think the the way to go, if you really want to think about a strategy, a long-term strategy to break up this alliance, is to secure a Ukrainian victory, which would then have domestic consequences in Russia that could then lead to a rapprochement between Europe and Russia, because there is also a pro-European faction within the Russian elite, and there is a history of sort of European integration, or let's say European interaction of Russia with Europe, and so that is the way to go to break the alliance with China, and not by throwing Ukraine under the bus in order to mollify Putin.
Thank you so much. Andras Umlaut joined us. Thank you so much for being with us this morning, sir. And that brings us back to the negotiations over Ukraine's status and the situation in the Eastern Europe. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has responded to the Polish president's proposal of redeploying American nuclear warheads to Poland. As stated by Vance in an interview for American TV channel Fox News, he would be shocked if Donald Trump agreed to Andrzej Duda's idea. Vance said he has not discussed the matter with Trump. However, he doesn't think the U.S. president would agree to it. Vance was asked about a recent interview Andrzej Duda gave to the British Financial Times, where he called on Washington to redeploy nuclear weapons to Poland. As stated by the Polish president, it would make for a nuclear deterrent against aggression from Russia. Furthermore, Andrzej Duda noted that as the border of NATO changed in 1999, so should its weapon deployment plans. Not everyone in Poland, however, is on the same page, as yesterday Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk criticized Duda, saying such matters should be discussed quietly and not in front of the world press. Residents of Moscow had a sleepless night on Thursday as Ukrainian drones targeted the city and its surroundings. So far, Russian authorities have not confirmed any injuries or casualties. Ukrainian drones hit a residential complex, damaging the roof of entrance. Another one crashed into an abandoned building, sparking a fire in the area. According to Moscow officials, Russian air defenses intercepted 4 drones flying towards the city. Their wreckage fell in multiple locations, damaging infrastructure, cars and private homes. Responding to the overnight strike, local authorities restricted flights at Moscow's Vnukovo and Kaluga airports. The assault is the second of its type launched on Moscow in the span of a week. On March 11th, Ukraine launched its largest ever drone strike on Moscow, deploying over 340 units. A large fire broke out at the Russian Tuapse oil refinery in the southern region of Krasnodar overnight on Thursday, engulfing more than 1,000 square meters. Russian authorities claim the blaze is the result of an attack carried out by Kiev. So far, there are no reports of any casualties. Residents of the city heard several explosions around 5 a.m. local time. Videos posted on social media show a large fire burning at a gasoline depot. The governor of the Krasnodar region said that to combat the blaze, local authorities mobilized over 100 emergency service personnel. With an annual processing capacity of 12 million tons of fuel, the Tuapse oil refinery is a significant supplier to the Russian military. The facility has been previously targeted by the Kiev, including a recent strike on February 26th. And with this news, we conclude this edition of World News. Please stay tuned to TVP World for more.